The Chrysler Car Corporation was born in the mind of Walter Chrysler in the 1920s out of an American appetite for more than just another Model T. From its inception, the company was known for its innovation, with its first model, the Chrysler 6, repping quite a few firsts for the American automotive industry. With this car, the company boomed, and ultimately Chrysler Corporation brought in companies like Dodge and Plymouth. Chrysler's strong and diverse product line helped it to survive the Depression, and also post-Depression with influences from Art Deco, Americans wanted their cars to be more glamorous than ever. Of the big three, Chrysler worked to bring in new technology and important innovations, some that were way ahead of their time, like the Chrysler Airflow, which was the first American car to use streamlining for aerodynamics and safety, and also unibody construction. It was undoubtedly too far ahead of its time, and ultimately failed because of this. After Walter Chrysler's death in 1938, the conservatively minded K.T. Keller would take over the company as his successor. Like the rest of the big three, Chrysler was put to work manufacturing for the war, and specifically tanks for the Allied forces during World War II. After the war, Americans experienced sort of another love affair with the automobile, as they had before and after the Depression, and Chrysler was eager to bring out products that would really satiate this appetite. K.T. Keller was very much against anything non-traditional in terms of automotive styling at this time, but companies like Ford were really innovating like never before. As Chrysler sales waned, people started joking about the big 2.5 instead of the big 3. In response to this, in 1955, Chrysler completely revamped their product line with more bold, beautiful cars like, for example, the Imperial. Through this time, Chrysler totally changed their branding, and they quickly went from being completely dominated by GM and Ford in terms of sales to becoming known as the most exciting manufacturer in America. Chrysler was known for making big, powerful vehicles, so as the muscle car era began to take over, the company really was in a good place. Now fast forward a bit, Chrysler came out of that muscle car and also fuel crisis era into the 80s, as British had and then also now Japanese manufacturers were beginning to take over the American automotive scene. Companies like Chrysler needed to once again make a name for themselves if they were to really have any chance of surviving. If you were around at this time, you know that Chrysler was literally on its way out at this point. They couldn't afford to make the kind of changes that GM and Ford could make in terms of just manufacturing and production. And in the switch from making, big honking American vehicles that are just like gas guzzlers to making affordable, smaller, economical vehicles, they just couldn't do it in order to keep up with foreign demand. Now, Lee Iacocca was president of Chrysler at this time, and as a true salesman, he successfully convinced Congress to give Chrysler $1.5 billion in federal loan guarantees. It was on Chrysler now to show what they could do with all of this money in terms of product. Could they make a convincing vehicle or multiple convincing vehicles for the American market that really would sell? So they made a talking car.
A door is ajar. Thank you.
Okay, that's not entirely true. Chrysler as an automotive company was, in all respects, completely reborn through the 1980s. But what's even more interesting is what Chrysler immediately did with all of that government cash flow.
The new Chrysler Corporation introduces the K-Cars, the American way to beat the pump. K-Cars. Aries K from Dodge, Reliant K from Plymouth. 6 all-new fuel-efficient front-wheel drive, quality-built cars and wagons.
The K-Car was essentially an all-new platform on which Chrysler, Dodge, and Plymouth products could now exist, from, vans to luxury sedans to things like the LeBaron. K-Cars were front-wheel drive, they repped a transverse engine, and had independent front and also semi-independent rear suspension, and it really was the car platform of the future for the company, and soon it would account for half of all Chrysler's sales. It's the K platform itself that really saved Chrysler, no doubt. But within the K-Car variants, Chrysler really worked to push the current boundaries in terms of automotive technology. In the pursuit of pushing boundaries, sometimes car manufacturers miss the mark just by a bit. And that was certainly true of Chrysler's newest bit of technology available on cars like the E-Class and the New Yorker. The E-Class did have loads of interesting features like the electronic travel computer cluster, which was basically a digital display showing you things like fuel range and miles per gallon rate. But the bane of its owners would be a novelty piece of tech known as electronic voice alert. In essence, these cars, well, they talk to you a lot.
Don't forget your keys. Thank you. Your headlights are on. Don't forget your keys. Your washer fluid is low. Your fuel is low. Your electrical system is malfunctioning. Thank you.
As long as the key was in the ignition, EVA would feature up to 11 different messages in all. Later models would have up to 24 messages, and those later models would even monitor things like brake pad wear. But for these earlier models, the 11 messages were, please fasten your seatbelt, a door is ajar, don't forget your keys, your headlights are on, and it would also notify you if your oil pressure was low, your engine was overheating, your electrical system had low voltage, your parking brake was on, your washer fluid was low, your fuel was low. It would also just tell you every time you got in the car, all monitored systems are functioning. But best of all, and most importantly, even more important than it telling you that a door was ajar, every time you fixed whatever problem it was saying that you needed to fix, the car, well, it would thank you. Now, this was more than just a voice box alerting you. It was quite a complex system, especially for its time. Electronic Voice Alert was developed by Chrysler's Huntsville Electronics Group alongside Texas Instruments. You might know Texas Instruments from calculators. Now, Texas Instruments' LPC speech chips had previously been used in the incredibly innovative and important Speak and Spell handheld computers. Though that little computer would change over the years, it was essentially a learning tool for spelling for kids, but later it would help out with math and other subjects. If you've seen the movie E.T., you may recognize it as part of the intergalactic phone. The Speak and Spell would tell you to spell words, you'd type them in, and it would tell you if you got it right. That voice system was quite robotic. I mean, you might hear Chrysler's system and think that it's robotic, but listening to that early Speak and Spell, of which this really comes from, it really shows how well Chrysler did with adapting this technology.
36 divided by 9, 4.
For EVA, they actually recorded real voice announcers and then digitized that voice. Here's what one of the project leaders, Jack McDowell, says about their development. We began with a professional announcer's voice and recorded and digitized the sounds into an extremely high data rate. This smooths the transition between words and reproduces the exact number of vibrations per second as a real voice. It is identical in waveform to an actual voice on an oscilloscope. So it is pleasant and it is smooth and flowing, not choppy. Of course, it's nothing compared to Siri or Alexa. I hope that if you're watching this on your TV right now, me saying Alexa just made your TV think I was talking to it. But for this time, it really was quite futuristic. The EVA system was mostly reliable and quite sophisticated for its time, but that didn't keep it from quickly weighing on its owners and ultimately becoming a bit of a joke. When I brought this topic up to my mom, basically talking cars from the 80s, she instantly went, "A door is ajar," and then said, "No, a door is a door." Looking back at Chrysler's talking car and placing it in its context, particularly the 80s here in America, the idea does make sense. This was a time of incredible technological progress. Electronic innovations really defined the 1980s. In the computer world, the first PC had just come out from IBM. Coupled with the boom of sci-fi films and literature, many believed that the future would be defined by this kind of gadgety tech, comparable with, Chrysler's talking car. I mean, just a year before they released this technology, the popular TV show Knight Rider featured a 1982 Trans Am named KIT that was essentially artificial intelligence, at least what they thought artificial intelligence would be. KIT was basically a supercomputer on wheels, capable of independent thought and action, and most importantly, it talked to you. Now, of course, it was just a voice actor. Chrysler's talking car couldn't do exactly the same thing, but people who watched shows like Knight Rider or paid attention to the technological advances happening in computers at this time, well, they rightly thought that this would play a key role in our future, and this is just kind of what it would look like. But the thing is, we rarely know exactly what bits of new tech will become prevalent or how that new tech will actually play out in our daily life. And that's especially true of Chrysler and the talking car. I mean, who would have thought social media, for example, would become what it is today? We really can't predict the next major advancements. In regards to the prospect of a talking car, today we have tech that talks to us and we talk to it, but it doesn't really look exactly like the talking car. Even though, honestly, a car that tells you there's something wrong with it is almost more useful. But at the same time, it feels gimmicky, and so one could probably compare this kind of feature to what we see in, some of Tesla's cars today. From being able to play video games to synchronized light shows to farting turn signals and Santa mode, I guess? But at least the talking car was a gimmick with a purpose. Honestly, I wouldn't mind my car telling me if it was overheating or losing oil pressure. I think that's a cool feature. I just don't need it to constantly remind me to put my seatbelt on or thank me every time I take the keys out. Much like the 80s, today we're seeing what bits of advanced futuristic tech can successfully make it into our automobiles in a way that actually forwards the overall experience or safety. Being able to summon my car from a parking lot is pretty damn cool if you ask me. But Monty Python mode is something hopefully we all make fun of in 50 years because it's stupid. But then we have to wonder about bigger things like self-driving. Is self-driving really the future? Some say it is, some say it's not. I think that Chrysler's talking cars is really a lesson for manufacturers today, because by the end of the 80s, this complex, expensive feature was ditched by Chrysler, and it really enabled them to focus on more important aspects of the K car and of their lineup, both in R&D and production. Even with all the focus on a gimmick like EVA and all the expenses that came with making this and implementing it well, the cars that were on the K car platform and all of the things that came from this platform were still some of the best American products from the 1980s. But the more luxurious offerings like the New Yorker that were really meant to compete with the likes of Mercedes, they could have been that much more competitive if the company hadn't dumped like millions of dollars into making the car talk. Keen early testers saw right away that it was a rather dumb, annoying feature that the car just didn't need. But sometimes these are the things that sell a car initially. Much like today, the goofy things that are on Teslas, especially when we first started seeing them, when they first started coming into production, these helped Tesla to trend like crazy on Twitter. And it was no different then, it was just happening around the water cooler, not on Twitter. But over time, the quality and reliability and comfort of a vehicle are what help keep that car alive. In my opinion, the gimmicks of many electric cars have worn off at this point. Nobody cares that much about goofy quirks and features. Is this $80,000 car going to hold up and be better than my combustion car? That's the question. That's what matters. I'd love to hear from you guys. Did any of you own or drive a talking car from the 80s? And what was your experience like? I would love to hear what you guys think. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and check out my other car stories on the channel. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.